intersecting with our own. In this model, people experiencing in the depths of the Soviet Union during the late 1940s, when Stalin's paranoia reached its peak and human experimentation was conducted behind walls of absolute secrecy, researchers at a classified facility outside Moscow began work on what they called Project Awakening. The goal was simple in concept, revolutionary in practice: eliminate the human need for sleep entirely, creating super soldiers who could fight continuously without rest. The experiment required 5 political prisoners, men whose disappearances would go unnoticed and unquestioned. They were sealed inside a specially constructed chamber, a windowless room with reinforced steel walls, basic furnishings, and most importantly, a sophisticated gas delivery system. The researchers had developed a stimulant gas derived from amphetamines and other experimental compounds that would keep the subjects conscious indefinitely. For the first 5 days, everything proceeded according to protocol. The subjects remained awake, alert, and surprisingly cooperative. They engaged in conversations, performed simple exercises, and showed no signs of the psychological breakdown that researchers had anticipated. Hidden microphones recorded their discussions about philosophy, their families, their hopes of eventual release. They seemed almost unnaturally calm and lucid. But on the 6th day, something changed. The conversations stopped. The subjects became withdrawn, spending hours staring at the walls in complete silence. When researchers spoke to them through the intercom system, responses came in whispers, fragmented sentences that didn't quite make sense. One subject began obsessively scratching at the walls with his fingernails, creating long gouges in the metal surface. By day 9, the subjects had stopped sleeping entirely, not because of the gas, but because they refused to. When researchers temporarily reduced the gas concentration to allow for rest, the subjects became violently agitated, screaming and clawing at the air vents, begging for the gas to be restored. They claimed that closing their eyes brought visions of things that should not be, nightmares, so terrifying that consciousness, no matter how tortured, was preferable. The hidden cameras captured increasingly disturbing behavior. The subjects had begun mutilating themselves, using torn pieces of clothing and broken furniture to create deep wounds across their bodies. But instead of showing pain, they appeared euphoric, laughing and dancing as blood pooled on the floor. They spoke to empty corners of the room, carrying on animated conversations with invisible entities. On day 12, the screaming began. It started as low moaning that gradually escalated into inhuman shrieks that continued for hours without pause. The subjects' voices became unrecognizable, distorted into sounds that seemed to come from damaged vocal cords. When researchers listened to the recordings later, audio analysis revealed frequencies that human vocal anatomy shouldn't be capable of producing. 3 subjects had begun consuming their own flesh, tearing strips of skin and muscle from their bodies with their teeth. Security footage showed them moving in ways that defied human physiology, joints bending in impossible directions, limbs contorting at angles that should have shattered bones. Yet they showed no signs of pain or physical limitation. By day 15, 2 subjects had died from blood loss and self-inflicted trauma. But the remaining 3 had undergone a transformation that left researchers questioning whether they were still human. Their eyes had developed a reflective quality, like those of nocturnal animals. Their movements had become predatory, stalking around the chamber on all 4s, sniffing the air as if tracking prey. The final communication from inside the chamber came on day 18, when researchers demanded to know the subject's condition. A voice that barely sounded human responded through the intercom. "We are what you made us. We are what waits in the dark when you close your eyes. We no longer want to be freed." When military personnel finally breached the chamber on day 20, they found a scene that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The walls were covered in a mixture of blood and what appeared to be crude artworks and figures that seemed to writhe and move in peripheral vision. The remaining subjects had arranged the dead bodies in ritualistic positions around what looked like an altar made from torn mattresses and furniture. The 3 survivors were no longer recognizable as the men who had entered the chamber. Their bodies were emaciated, but somehow stronger, their movements fluid and unnatural. When approached, they didn't respond to their names or show recognition of human speech. Instead, they tilted their heads like curious animals and made clicking sounds with their tongues. Most disturbing of all, they refused to leave the chamber. When soldiers attempted to remove them by force, the subjects displayed inhuman strength and agility, scaling the walls and clinging to the ceiling like insects. Their fingernails had grown into claw-like appendages, capable of tearing through metal. On the morning of June 30th, 1908, at exactly 7:17 a.m. local time,